The last sunset I saw as a free woman. They say you don't remember most sunsets. I remember this one vividly because it was the last one I saw through unfiltered glass for 10 years. The sky that evening was painted in deep oranges and bruised purples, the kind of sky you see on postcards. I stood on our back porch, barefoot on the splintered wood, sipping from a chipped coffee mug while my husband, Ethan, paced nervously inside on the phone. His voice was low but sharp. I couldn't make out every word, just fragments there. Onto something. No loose ends. She'll hold. I told myself it was about work. I told myself he was just stressed from the startup failing, that the debts were temporary, that love meant patience, loyalty, sacrifice. I was wrong. Later, that night, they came. 2 officers. No warning. No questions. Just handcuffs. Danica Rivera. The taller one said, "You're under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice." My knees buckled. I didn't even know what wire fraud was. Ethan had come running down the stairs in mock panic, shirt half buttoned, eyes wide with staged confusion. "This has to be a mistake," he said. "She's my wife. She wouldn't even know how to do something like that." But he didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't tell them to stop. He didn't follow us to the station. I didn't know it then. But that was the moment he handed me the knife and walked away clean. To the police station. They laid out everything like a murder mystery dinner. My signature on financial documents I'd never seen. My email address used to reroute money from fake vendors. The IP address traced back to our house. My laptop. My breath was shaking. My voice barely a whisper. I didn't do any of this. But the evidence didn't care. And neither did Ethan. He came to visit me exactly once before the trial. He held my hand across the plastic divider and said, "If you love me, you won't fight this. If you fight it, it'll drag me down too. They'll lock us both up. But if you just take the deal, I'll be here when you get out. 10 years. 10 years." I signed the plea. I told myself it was love, that he would wait, that this nightmare would end with us holding hands at the prison gates. Stronger for it. Instead, he stopped visiting after year 2. By year 4, I stopped getting his letters. And by year 6, I stopped looking for his name during mail call. But the rage, that never left. It lived in my spine, curled around my heart, whispered in my ear every time I watched another woman walk free. Because deep down, I knew. He didn't just let me take the fall. He built the gallows, tied the rope, and smiled as I climbed. And when I got out, I wasn't coming for answers. I was coming for justice. The letter I never sent. They gave me exactly 10 minutes to pack my things when I was released. 10 minutes to gather the scraps of a life I no longer recognized, books I never finished, letters I never received, and a photo of Ethan, folded so many times the creases had become scars across his smiling face. I didn't take the photo. I left it on the metal cot, like a warning to the next woman who might believe too much, trust too hard, love too blindly. The air outside smelled like gasoline and cold metal. I stood at the prison gates, clutching a duffel bag and wearing jeans that hadn't fit since I was 30. I was now 40, 10 years of rot behind me. And all I had to show for it was silence from the men I once gave my future to. But I wasn't empty. I had something else. A letter I wrote in year 7. A letter I never sent. "Dear Ethan, every time I close my eyes, I see your hands. The ones that used to trace lines down my back. The ones that used to pour my coffee with cinnamon just the way I liked it. The ones that signed my name on documents that put me here. I wonder if you ever flinched. I wonder if it ever kept you up at night, the sound of the cell door slamming behind me. Or if you slept easier with all that stolen peace. They said I could get out early for good behavior. But you already knew I was good, didn't you? You built your freedom on it. So here's a promise, not a threat. I'm not coming back to you. I'm coming back for you." I wrote those words with shaking hands and sealed them with breathless rage. But I never mailed it, because letters are for people who still hope. I didn't want him to know I still had fire. I wanted him to think I was ashes, because ashes don't rise. But I was about to, when I stepped back into the world. I didn't go to family. What family? My mother had died while I was inside stroke. They said I couldn't attend the funeral. Ethan didn't even call to tell me. I found out from a corrections officer 3 months late. My father, he left when I was 10. Friends, they vanished one by one. Ghosts who couldn't afford to be haunted by my shame. I went to a halfway house 2 towns away. New zip code, new face, same name for now. I needed to know who I was before I could become someone else. And I needed to find Ethan. It didn't take long. He wasn't hiding. In no aliases, no fake businesses, no foreign countries, just a 2-story craftsman house in a better neighborhood than we'd ever dreamed of. A shiny Tesla in the driveway, and a woman barefoot and pregnant watering begonias out front. It took everything in me not to charge across the street and scream. Instead, I watched, I waited, and I smiled. Because the one thing prison taught me better than anything else was patience. The life he stole from me, you'd think 10 years of prison would prepare you for how much the world changes. It does. End single quotes. It prepares you for silence, for counting seconds between footsteps, for memorizing the cracks in a ceiling like constellations, but not for walking into a grocery store and realizing there's no such thing as cashiers anymore. Not for being treated like a ghost in a city that used to know your name. Not for watching your ex-husband live the exact life he promised you with someone else. I started my surveillance the same way I learned to read guards in prison. Quiet, consistent, invisible. His house was 4 blocks from the community library. Ironic, considering he never read anything that didn't have a dollar sign on it. I'd walk past twice a day, sunglasses on, earbuds in, dressed like a woman who belonged nowhere and didn't want to be noticed. I watched them like a movie. I couldn't pause. Ethan had gained weight. Not much, just enough to notice in the neck and jawline. His hairline was retreating slightly, but his confidence, no, that was untouched. He still moved like the world owed him gratitude, like every sidewalk should clear before his shoes hit pavement. And the woman? Her name was Clara. I found it on the mailbox. I heard it in the way he called for her across their porch. Sweet and casual, like he hadn't ever set fire to someone else's world. She was younger, maybe 30, maybe less. Light brown hair, always tied up in a loose bun. Wore a small gold cross around her neck. Always smiling, always glowing, pregnant. 7 months, maybe. It stung more than I thought it would. Not because he'd moved on, but because he looked happy, because he looked free. I started tracking his habits like a case file. Monday, gym at 7 a.m. Coffee at the grind spot by 8:15. Home office until 3. Tuesday, virtual meetings, jog around the block, dinner on the porch. Friday nights, a little jazz bar called Crescendo, where he'd bring Clara and laugh too loud over overpriced cocktails. Routine. Predictable. Vulnerable. It wasn't revenge yet. It was data. And while I gathered data, I worked. The halfway house set me up with a cleaning job at a medical clinic, scrubbing floors, taking out trash, mopping blood. I did it with a smile so fake it hurt my cheeks. I said thank you every time someone tossed a used glove in my direction, but every time I cleaned a mirror, I looked myself in the eye and whispered, "You're not staying here." Because I wasn't. One evening, after his car left the driveway and Clara was alone with her swollen belly and a basket of laundry, I crossed the street and stood in front of the house. My hand reached out, hovered over the doorbell. I imagined it. Her opening the door, her smile fading, me saying, "Hi, I'm Danica. I used to be married to the man who got you pregnant." Fun fact, he let me rot in prison for a crime he committed. I didn't press it. Not yet. Because she wasn't the target. She was just collateral, innocent for now. Instead, I walked away, back to my tiny cot, back to my peeling ceiling. But that night, I didn't sleep. That night, I started writing. Not a letter this time, but a plan. I learned to smile with a knife in my hand. You don't survive prison by being angry. You survive by learning how to smile when you're boiling inside. You learn how to nod when someone takes your seat, how to laugh when someone lies to your face, and how to say thank you when they hand you something laced with poison. Prison taught me that people who smile with their teeth are rarely the ones you should fear. It's the ones who smile with their eyes cold. And that's what I became. A woman who smiled cold. I didn't want Ethan to feel fear right away. That would have been too generous. I wanted him to feel comfort first. I wanted him to get used to the air being easy to breathe, because only then does it hurt when it gets ripped from your lungs. So I started small. An anonymous tip to the IRS. A. Whisper about inconsistencies in his business taxes. I didn't need it to stick. I just needed the letterhead to land in his mailbox, just enough to make his hands tremble when he opened the envelope. 2 days later, I watched from across the street as he stood frozen at his mailbox, reading, then ripping, then looking over both shoulders like the past had finally found his address. It had. But that wasn't the best part. The best part came 3 weeks later when I applied for a job at his company under a different name. Ethan owned a boutique marketing agency now. Nothing huge, just a few contracts with luxury real estate agents and startup tech companies. But it was enough to make him feel like a king. The office was on the 14th floor of a downtown building with glass walls and trendy succulents on every desk. I walked in with a wig, blonde, blunt cut, contacts that turned my eyes a soft green, a suit from a thrift shop that I tailored myself until it fit like money. My name was Marissa Lang. They didn't recognize me. Why would they? To them, I was just another overqualified, underpaid applicant desperate to write ad copy for condos no one could afford. I wasn't there to get a paycheck. I was there to poison the water slowly. Marissa, Ethan said, shaking my hand, not knowing I once spent 3,762 nights picturing that very moment. Nice to meet you, I replied, smiling like a cobra. He didn't recognize my voice. Prison changes that too. We talked for 10 minutes. He asked about my writing experience. I lied beautifully. He offered me a part-time freelance role to see how we vibe. I accepted. He gave me the building key card and told me to drop by anytime. I nearly laughed. I already had. For the next month, I watched from inside every client file, every contract, every detail of how his business ran. But more than that, I watched Ethan. He had tells, nervous ones, a twitch when someone mentioned compliance, a flinch when a client brought up audits, a way of deflecting when people asked how he got started. And Clara, she stopped coming by the office, 8 months pregnant now, swelling with expectation, trusting him to carry the weight of their future. But I knew what she didn't. He never carries weight. He lets others drown under it while he smiles from the shore. Not this time. Not with me watching, because this time I brought my own rope. And I'm the one tying the knot. I made him laugh while I looted his life. Trust is funny. It's not built on truth, it's built on repetition, on rhythm, on showing up at the same time, smiling the same way, making people feel like they're in control. And Ethan, he loved control, so I gave it to him. Or at least, I let him believe he had it. Every time I walked into that office, he greeted me with a smirk like he owned the air in the room. I smiled back like I didn't want to suffocate him with it. Marissa, he'd say, you're a lifesaver. I was, just not for him. My assignments were simple at first. Revise a pitch deck, edit a client proposal, rewrite a branding document. Nothing glamorous, nothing urgent. But it gave me access. Access to files, passwords, client records, back-end logins. I took my time, weeks of smiling, of nodding, of staying late when no one else would. One Friday night, while the rest of the team headed to rooftop drinks, I stayed behind claiming I had a migraine. Instead, I cloned Ethan's entire laptop onto a hidden drive I bought with cash from a pawn necklace. Inside that drive, every lie he ever typed, fake vendor accounts, shell payments, offshore transfers that trace back years, some of them even dated during the months he visited me in prison, swearing he had nothing left. I wanted to scream. Instead, I smiled. I watched his routines, studied his calls, memorized his tells, and I began to carve out pieces of his empire quietly, precisely. I reached out to 2 of his biggest clients using an anonymous email account I set up from an untraceable VPN. I sent them internal screenshots. Proof of billing inconsistencies. Fabricated just enough truth to make it impossible to ignore. By the time the board requested an audit, Ethan was already sweating through his collar every morning. Still, he smiled. He always smiled, until the morning. He walked into his office and saw me sitting at his desk. Didn't expect you in early, he said, forcing casual. I like to see what things look like before the sun hits them, I replied, sipping his favorite brand of coffee, the one he told me about 10 years ago. His eyes twitched. Just once. It was enough. That night, I made my biggest move yet. I walked to Clara's house. Not to confront her. To leave something. A manila envelope. And marked, quiet, resting gently on her welcome mat like a sleeping curse. Inside, photos, bank records, copies of the Shell accounts, a timeline meticulously mapped of where Ethan really was during their first 2 years together. He had told her he was consulting abroad, but the records showed the truth. He was funding a new life with money he stole while his wife, me, rotted behind bars for his crimes. And Clara, she was just a new chapter. A prettier one. One that wouldn't last. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't need to, because I knew that by morning, Clara would read every line. And Ethan? He would wake up next to a woman who knew the truth. And for once, he'd be the one in the dark. She wasn't just pregnant, she was pretending. I always assumed Clara was a victim, innocent, naive. Just another woman swept into Ethan's world by his charm and calculated lies. But I was wrong, because when I left that envelope on her doorstep, I expected panic, rage, betrayal. What I got was silence, deafening, deliberate silence. No police report, no lawyer, no screaming match on the front lawn, just nothing. Until 2 days later, when I found her standing outside my building, alone, wearing a pale pink coat, hands gently resting on her round stomach, and eyes that didn't blink enough. You left this, she said, holding the envelope in one hand, not shaking, not scared, just aware. I didn't invite her in. She didn't need an invitation. I read every word she said, stepping into the hallway, twice. And I knew. The world tilted under my feet. You what? I knew, she repeated calmly. Not everything. But I knew Ethan wasn't clean. I just chose not to look too closely. She paused, then looked me square in the eyes. I'm not pregnant. Silence. A full 5 seconds of it. What? The bump is a prosthetic. We've been trying for months. It was his idea to tell people I was expecting. Said it made us look like a power couple. Solid, safe, marketable, the perfect face for the agency. And you went along with it? She shrugged. I wanted to believe the lie, just like you did. Back then, my knees nearly gave out. She wasn't just in Ethan's web. She was spinning it too. I used to be a marketing director for a pharmaceutical giant, she continued. I left because I thought I'd finally found a man who wanted a life, not a resume. She gave a small, bitter laugh. Turns out, he wanted both. I tried to process it all. The fake pregnancy, the performative perfection, the complicity. So why are you here? I finally asked. Why tell me? Clara didn't smile. She didn't flinch. Because I'm done protecting him. And if you're going to bring him down, I want in. I didn't trust her. Not fully. But I didn't say no. Because if you want to destroy a man like Ethan, you don't do it from outside the walls. You do it from the bed he sleeps in. Clara knew everything, his passwords, his calendar, his secret meetings. She became my eyes and ears in the one place I couldn't go. And she had her own reasons. Ethan had drained her savings, promised equity in a company he legally kept only in his name. She was trapped, a co-star in his performance, playing the perfect wife while he stole years from both of us. I want him ruined, she whispered one night over burner phones and cheap wine. I want him to feel small, just once. I looked her in the eye. Then let's make him disappear. Not from the earth, not from existence, from power. From control. From everything he built on our backs. We buried him while he was still smiling. Ethan had no idea he was already a dead man. Every morning, he'd kiss Clara on the cheek, grab his leather briefcase, and head to the office thinking he was building an empire. He was actually laying bricks on his own tomb. We didn't go for the throat immediately. That would have been too merciful. Instead, we started where he'd never look his pride. Clara quietly planted a rumor with one of the firm's largest clients, suggesting Ethan was taking liberties with proprietary data. She didn't accuse, just hinted. The kind of whisper that sounds too subtle to be dangerous but lingers like a toxin. Meanwhile, I revised the financial records just enough to expose a few clerical errors. I sent them anonymously to a freelance journalist who specialized in corporate corruption. 3 weeks later, an article hit the digital press. The agency king with a rotten crown. The piece didn't name him directly, but it didn't have to. Ethan knew. I watched him read it at his desk, his eyes narrowing, jaw tightening. He didn't speak for an hour, didn't answer calls, just sat there, flipping the mouse back and forth, stuck in a loop he couldn't control. That was day 1. Day 14. The audit began. Internal. Voluntary for now. He tried to play it cool, told his team it was just routine. But his pacing said otherwise. He called Clara in to vent. "We need to present unity," he told her, holding both her hands like a campaign photo. She smiled back at him and said, "Of course." Later, that night, she called me from the bathroom. "He's shaking. He's trying to get ahead of something. But he doesn't know what it is." That was the beauty of it. We were the thing. Day 21. I triggered the next phase. Using credentials Clara provided, I scheduled a transfer of funds from a company account to one of Ethan's off-the-books vendor names, the same one I'd flagged to the IRS weeks earlier. It was small, just enough to be noticed, just enough to look real. Then I leaked it. An anonymous report to the firm's board landed like a Molotov cocktail. This time, there was no pretending. No smiling. No speeches, only a closed-door meeting and a CFO with a white face walking out. 30 minutes later, Ethan was given an ultimatum. Step down voluntarily, or the board will go public. He agreed to take a temporary leave, but we both knew he was never coming back. That night, Clara and I met in the same parking garage we always did. "We did it," she said softly. "Almost," I replied. "There's just one more thing left." She raised an eyebrow. "What?" I handed her a folder. Inside, the divorce papers, already signed by me, backdated, filed quietly. "You said you wanted him to feel small," I said. "Let's make sure he does it alone." I left him with nothing but his name, and even that wasn't his. Ethan didn't even bother calling me. I'd expected a dramatic voicemail, a bitter email, maybe even one of those self-pitying letters where he blames everyone but himself. But there was nothing. Just silence, the kind of silence that doesn't come from peace but from drowning. Clara told me he moved into a cheap condo on the other side of town. Said he told his assistant he needed space to think. What he really needed was a mirror. But men like Ethan don't own those, not real ones. The kind that show you your rot. His company was gone. The board replaced him with someone younger, hungrier, and far less willing to cover up a trail of lies. His bank accounts? Frozen, pending an ongoing investigation. His reputation? Reduced to a cautionary tale whispered over rooftop cocktails. And Clara? She was gone too, moved out while he was at therapy. Left behind the prosthetic bump in a showbox on the kitchen table, a final prop from the play they both co-wrote. I didn't reach out to him, but I made sure he saw me. One photo. That's all it took. Me, standing in front of a publishing house, my new novel clutched in hand. Title? 3,000 Nights, by Danica Rhodes. He knew what it meant. He knew who it was for. He knew the story. Because it was his too. Only this time, I owned it. He let me rot, so I let him watch me rise. The courtroom was quiet, not with tension, not with suspense, but with the kind of quiet that hangs in the air after a storm tears through everything and leaves only debris behind. Ethan sat 2 rows behind me. No lawyer, no Clara, no wedding ring. Just a man in a wrinkled suit, clutching a folder with trembling hands. The final hearing was procedural and update on the IRS findings. The money trail was undeniable. The shell companies exposed, the fraud clear. He wouldn't face prison time, but he'd face something worse. He'd be irrelevant, blacklisted, bankrupted. Alone. As the judge closed the file and banged the gavel, I stood up without looking back. I didn't need to see his face. I'd memorized that look the day he left me in a jail cell and said, "You'll thank me someday." Today wasn't that day. Outside, a reporter called my name. "Miss Rhodes, can you comment on the new book deal?" I smiled. "Just enough. It's not about revenge," I said into the camera. "It's about truth. And what happens when you bury it for too long?" Click. Flash. My story was everywhere now. Not just headlines, not just whispers, but shelves, screens, words that would live longer than either of us. That night, I visited my old apartment one last time. Not for nostalgia, for closure. I stood in the center of the room I once begged to come home to. The room I waited in while lawyers shredded my life and Ethan smiled on magazine covers. And I whispered one sentence out loud, just to hear how it sounded in the air. "I made it. Not we, not he, I, because I did. Without his hand, without his name, without owing anyone anything." As I turned off the light and locked the door for good, I knew he was still watching me. Not with love, with loss, the kind of loss that only comes when you realize the thing you thought was replaceable was the very thing holding your world together. He let me rot, so I let him live long enough to watch me rise, and that was the real sentence.